Joining us live now for more details on this developing story is Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, who is currently a member of the National Security Advisory Board and is a former Deputy Chief of Army. Sir, thanks so much for joining us. Now, I'd like to begin this discussion by rewinding a bit. We know the talks of disengagement were on between India and China. And I believe the question on all our minds is, how does a violent clash like this take place where 20 Indian soldiers are killed? And in fact, our sources are now telling us that 4 Indian soldiers as of now are in critical condition. So what, in your opinion, could have precipitated this violent clash?
You see, from the reports that we have available, it's quite clear that they had agreed to de-escalate from all these areas on the 6th of June. And on a day-to-day basis, they were also holding meetings at the level of the brigadier, at the level of the colonels and so on, to see how it is going. So quite clearly, day 4 yesterday, in the evening, in fact late evening, when our people were verifying if this de-escalation has, or whatever the agreed disengagement and pulling back was to happen, when they were verifying that, that is the time when this scuffle has occurred. And obviously it has become as aggressive and as violent as you've just mentioned. And quite clearly, all these, agreements and protocols that we have, they have all been violated. And this is, I think, a climaxing of a trend that we have been witnessing for the last almost 6 to 7 years. It has only got, worsened year after year. 2013, I think, is when the this kind of misconduct started, and today we are seeing it in its worst dimension. And quite clearly, those agreements, protocols are not tenable any longer. They all either need to be revisited, or we just have to dump them and decide what do we want to do next. And even over here, I am of the opinion that it is not as if, it is some one-off isolated incident. It is very much part of a design. And with the Chinese, nothing happens so locally. It's all very much, planned and worked out. Right. And why I state this, if you see the complete range over which this, incident of Eastern Ladakh has happened, for a moment, let us forget about the Sikkim part. Even over there, initially you saw the excitement was much more on the Pangong-so, and now suddenly it has shifted over here. Rest of the areas are quiet. So what is it? That this is the place where it is pinching them the most. And why is it pinching them the most? Because this is closest to the road that has got connected last year to the area of Daulat Beg Oldie. Right. And this is where they feel threatened the most because of our ability to build up troops and threaten them to the east onto Aksai Chin and to the north onto the Galwan Valley, which was illegally ceded to them by the Pakis in 1963, and then going beyond into where the CPEC is, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is coming. So obviously this is the area which is threatening them the most, and therefore such, barbaric kind of conduct. This is not military conduct. Absolutely. This is not how disciplined soldiers behave. But that said, I think, of course, you feel terribly sorry, and all my condolences to the families and the unit that has suffered the loss. But the point is, I think they have been given a very, very strong response. As you're getting inputs, I think ANI said that our intercepts have picked up 43 casualties. Right. There are some intel reports that are coming in from the US who are assessing at least 35 PLA killed. And they have the US intel seems to be alluding to the fact that batons and stones and perhaps falling off that difficult terrain is the cause of the casualties. So all in all, I think a very...
General Saha, I'd just like to expand on what you just mentioned. Now, there has been plenty of speculation about the tensions between India and China and reasons for them. And experts now say that China is irked by India's speedy development of infrastructure, especially in recent years, in some strategic sections of the line of actual control, including in Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. So could this have led to this provocation from China?
You see, there is a multiplicity of threats over here which China is perceiving. As you said, the way and the rapid progress of infrastructure development that we have been seeing in the last 5 to 6 years, that obviously is causing a threat to them. And specifically this road I mentioned about. And the other thing is, if you see the way India's international sort of stature, the way India is engaging with a whole lot of other like-minded countries, obviously it is putting them, at a sort of disadvantage. And frankly speaking, let's say between the US, between Australia, between Japan and India, there is only one country that is sharing border with them, and that is India. So that is why you see the impact of that quite clearly coming out on the ground over here.
Right.
So therefore,
but a massive troop build-up like this along the line of actual control from the Chinese side at a time when this border has been largely peaceful for nearly 4 decades. And many are now saying that this is what China does, forcibly establish military presence in a disputed region and then stake claim to it. So can you weigh in on this as well?
You see, I would not agree with the assessment that this area has been peaceful. No. In 2013, we had the Depsang incident, that is in the Daulat Beg Oldi area itself. In 2014, we had the Chumar incident, which is south of Demchok. And Demchok has kept figuring every year, literally every year. So therefore, there is activity which is happening all along eastern Ladakh, literally on a yearly basis, starting from 2013 onwards. In this particular year, obviously, they have come up with much greater numbers. So they seem to have planned something. And for the immediate provocation, as far as this sector is concerned, well, as many are saying, it is perhaps the connectivity that has been achieved to DBO, because I think the Chinese were assuming that India will never be able to achieve this connectivity.
Right.
And now that it has happened, so therefore there is maximum sensitivity. And this area of Patrol Point 14, PP14, which is being referred to, that obviously is closest to this. And it is very, very treacherous terrain. Even to reach PP14, you have to keep crossing the river Galwan number of times up and down.
Right.
So it is not easy terrain at all. It is very challenging to even secure the border. So therefore, we are seeing the kind of, actions that are there. And I'm very proud of the fact that the way our soldiers, despite all these challenges, are, managing that frontier,
Absolutely.
Managing that border and giving the most, befitting response that the Chinese deserve. I mean, if they have used stones, they have got it back with stones. And tomorrow, if there is an escalation, the way we have built up our troops, I'm more than certain that they are going to get it. They are going to get what they are asking for.
Now, in all of this, we cannot ignore one very important factor, that China and its President Xi Jinping are facing global criticism over their poor handling of the coronavirus outbreak, and now a skirmish like this at the border. So could this be a tactic to distract or deviate from the criticism that is being targeted at China?
Yes, of course. And, from China, because everything is so opaque, you don't come to know. But for the people who are, well into it, if you read, it is not only the handling of the COVID, there is a lot of dissension within China, because the way Xi Jinping has chosen to, keep himself forever and ever. So there is dissension because of that. We are all aware of what's happening in Hong Kong, how the, agreements with the British have been completely, thrown into the garbage, and the way they are enacting new laws. What's happening in Taiwan? I mean, it's actually speaking from every corner today. China is in a difficult position. In the US, only a little while back, I think something has been tabled in the Congress that, why don't we change our stance on Tibet? The trade war we are well aware of. We are seeing what's happening with France. They expressed their, annoyance with France because they decided to refurbish the ships of Taiwan. And France said, you go ahead and mind your business with the COVID. Right. These are our agreements with Taiwan. We will do what we need to do. Right. We are aware of what's happening with Australia. We are aware of what's happening with the UK, where a whole lot of former ministers have written to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson that UK must lead to sort of, protest against whatever is happening in Hong Kong. Right. So clearly speaking, they are cornered from every direction. So therefore, these kind of reactions and this kind of very bizarre conduct on the field.
Right. Now, India for now has blamed these clashes on an attempt by the Chinese side to unilaterally change the status quo at the border, rebutting China's claims that Indian soldiers crossed the border. So the question which begs to be asked is, what change really in status quo of the peaceful border does China intend to make? You
see, now in these areas, there are multiple lines. When I say multiple, some places there are 2 lines, some places there are 3 lines, some are 1960 claims, some are later, line of actual control. The long and short of the point is, these are not boundaries that are agreed upon. Because they are not agreed upon, so therefore they are not delineated, they are not demarcated, and hence all this confusion. But that apart, I mean, that situation was carrying on quite okay till about 2013-14, from when we are seeing, this kind of deterioration in the abidance with the principles and the protocols. And this time around, I think it has been completely dumped. If you go back to what happened in Doklam, or for that matter, even to Depsang, even after the agreement, it took a long time for the Chinese, to transmit the instructions down to the ground.
Right.
And invariably there were problems. And only difference between not implementing what was agreed in the talks on the ground and what we are seeing this time, there is a much higher order of aggressiveness and violence which is coming. So quite clearly, some kind of, arrogance which is coming out of propaganda within the country. We know that false notion of superiority, that arrogance is coming as a result of the propaganda which is hammered. And so therefore, just as well that they get they get hammered here to realize what the reality is. I mean, if anybody is thinking that they can get away by doing such violations with such violence, excuse me, Indian Army is not going to tolerate it. Today we have enough numbers, enough strength, whether it is in terms of the infantry over there, whether it is in terms of artillery, tanks, infantry combat vehicles, Air Force. From every angle, I think the country is well prepared to exercise any option that the situation may require.
All right, sir. Actually, I'd like to ask you one final question before we wrap up this discussion. What really lies ahead for the India-China relationship now? Because we know that in India there is a growing sentiment now to boycott all Chinese goods. India has also said that they will not be compromising on the territorial integrity and sovereignty. So what lies ahead between the two neighbors?
Again, it's a very, very good question which you ask, because if you see all over the country today, there are protests which are happening. So if Chinese are studying their own precepts and teachings, I think they are getting a good sense of the popular will in the country, in India today. So therefore, it is in Chinese interest to sort of de-escalate, and it is in their interest to start abiding by whatever agreements that are happening. And if that were not to happen, we are already seeing an escalation. Well, it will spiral if it has to, if it is compelled upon India spiraling like that. And we have to be prepared for the worst. But that said, I only do hope that good sense prevails.
Right.
And whatever they have agreed on the 6th of June, the commanders are able to make sure that the Chinese commanders are able to make sure that their soldiers abide by whatever has been agreed upon.
All right, General Saha, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your time and for all your insights.